it, but let me try to see if I can share my screen. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our expert panel, Careers on Sales. Tonight, we are joined by recent graduates like yourselves and international students from institutions across Canada and, of course, internationally. My name is Han, and I will be moderating your session tonight. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All participants have been muted. There's no need to use the video, and you should be able to hear via your computer audio advice. Please make sure to ask questions under the Q&A section, not the chat function, but the Q&A section. That will go directly to the speaker. And of course, the session is being recorded. Your guest host, I am not Zora, but my name is Han. And I've been working with Devant quite some time now, but prior to joining Devant, I worked in nonprofit agencies helping newcomers succeed here in Canada. So going back, please make sure you use your Q&A function to ask questions. Everyone will be provided a Devant newsletter called the Devant Insider. Please feel free to visit our website, devant.ca. Check out the future workshops and events there, and please make sure you share it with your family, your friends, so that they can come into these events. Just to ensure that you have a great Zoom experience, feel free to go do a full screen mode and speaker view for the best experience. Again, Q&A is for the questions to ask to the speakers, and the chat function, this is where you want to perhaps ask or not ask or insert any resources or talk about yourselves and where you're from. Please feel free to use the chat function for that. So before we begin, I want to talk about Devant. We are a subsidiary of Academica Group. They are the largest organization providing research and consulting expertise to colleges and universities across Canada. They focus on student recruitment, student success, and career development. And Academica Group started Devant because they saw the challenges and opportunities that recent graduates like yourself had when looking to establish a successful career in Canada. And the word Devant quite literally means to be in front of. So we believe that our services and support will bring you in front of the rest of your journey to stay, work, and succeed in Canada. Today, we have two great guest speaker panels. Alan Maguire, he is the co-founder and CEO of ESI. Mahima Gyawali, she is the Director of Sales at PointClickCare. A little bit about Mahima, she's the Director of Sales at PointClickCare. She's got 10 years plus experience, extensive experience in sales in the healthcare information technology sector. She's a graduate of McMaster University, as well as U of T. She is also a former international student like yourselves. Also, Alan's the co-founder and CEO of ESI. It's established to address the global shortage of sales skills today by providing an online skills development and certification solution. He is the director at Customer Minds and a partner at Leaf Investments, which is Europe's first independent learning technology investment fund. So please welcome Alan and Mahima. And actually, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I thought perhaps welcome our two guest speakers and also perhaps talk about careers and sales and their overall experience. So welcome, Alan, Mahima.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So you're welcome. So is there a way that perhaps I can provide the floor to you, Mahima, at first to talk about your experience and the careers in sales, any tips that you can provide to our attendees today, and then I'll pass it over to Alan and his experience in sales as well, and any tips that you would like to provide aspiring sales professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Mahima. As Han mentioned earlier, I've been in sales for over 10 years, over a decade, mainly in healthcare technology sales. And I guess I know we have a whole deck later to kind of bust some myths about sales, but my whole, message around sales is a career. It's not just a transactional thing that, that people do. There is a lot of, if there's no revenue in the business can't thrive. So sales is a critical function in any organization, healthcare or not. And I feel like that gets overlooked a lot of the times based on the myths that exist about salespeople and the career itself. And that's really all I have to say. Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks a million, Mahima. It's great to see you again. And it's great to be back, guys, because we had a lot of fun doing this last year. So greetings from Dublin in Ireland, which is where ESI is based and founded. I'll give a much bigger, while I've been in sales most of my professional life as well, I'll give a much bigger picture, I suppose, perspective, because ESI as a business was founded really because we tripped across a global, and I mean a truly global problem, which is that there's a global shortage of sales and commercial talent worldwide. And that is a kind of a repeatable fact that comes from lots of organizations like Glassdoor and Manpower and Gartner every single year when it talks about talent and the need for talent in organizations across the globe. And our thesis in ESI is that the reason that sales talent shortage exists is because the skills required to sell today, and this is very much talking to Mahima's point about sales as a career, but the skills required to sell today are infinitely more complex and sophisticated than they ever were before. And what is largely being perceived as being a relatively low-skilled or unskilled job for several decades, going right back to when my career started, has evolved into a very highly skilled profession. And that is not a perspective that many people across the globe have. So the kind of key message, I think, for the audience today, or the key message we'll come back to, and I'll probably keep going back to the word skills all the time, is that, first of all, whatever your perceptions of sales are, and we're hoping to bust some of those myths today, this evening, those perceptions are probably misplaced. Instead of thinking about sales as being a rather crudely skilled job, it is a highly skilled profession that merits the same treatment as any other profession in a corporation. And that's a message we really want to get across, I think, on the panel tonight. But I think probably what might be even more interesting for panelists here and students who are associated with Devant is that talent shortage means that there's a glut of really attractive professional roles in sales or commercial related functions in companies across the globe, but particularly across Canada. I think at any given point in time, there's something like 80 to 100,000 vacant sales roles in Canada. And that means that there's a really kind of, kind of really healthy furrow to plow if you're looking for employment and you're looking for highly skilled employment as highly skilled international graduates. You will find plenty of job and career opportunities in the commercial domain, as much as you will in any other domain that you're looking at. And hopefully our session tonight will open your eyes to those opportunities and maybe tempt some of you into pursuing sales as a profession of aspiration and choice.
Absolutely. So let's debunk some of those myths and see if we can really get some of these clients or job seekers into the sales sector. So myth number one, sales is about getting people to buy things they don't want. Is that true in your experience? Mahima, I can ask you first though.
No, not necessarily. I think there's aspect of, where sales reps are trying to uncover opportunities that, perhaps buyers haven't really thought about, but it's not about just pushing product or services onto an individual or an organization that's not needed. I think the world's changed so much with, access to information on the internet that a lot of the buyers that come to market are highly sophisticated. They know what they want, so that's where sales reps need to get smarter too, right? You're not just going there and talking about your product or services as if it's the first time they've heard about it. You got to, come in with the perspective of what business challenge is my product or service trying to solve for this organization, and how can I be of, help or service to them. And yeah, in that process, you might uncover some products and services that they may not have thought of. So it's not really about pushing products or services down their throat that they don't want, but it's really about building a business case for that organization, for what they may need. So that's kind of my answer. And just also to give everyone context, when I talk about sales, I'm really talking about a B2B context. So that way, that's kind of where my experience is. So just want to make sure I clarify that before we kind of like jump into the various questions. Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mahima. Yeah, I was actually going to make exactly the same point at the outset. I mean, we're very passionate at ESI about the profession of selling in any context around the world, but our curriculum, our credential program, our certification program is very much anchored around the skills that we know from our research that employers want in a business-to-business sales context. So that's probably quite helpful in and of itself, that there are different flavors of sales out there. And that isn't to say that any consumer-based sales profession isn't highly skilled either, that it is very, very often equally as highly skilled a career path. But I think for context this evening, a lot of Mahima and my comments will come from a business-to-business sales context. And it's, I suppose it's in that context that the reason we passionately believe that myth is untrue is because it completely undervalues in our world how sophisticated and professional modern business buyers are. Mahima nailed it, that there was a time, and I'm going back again, decades, 20, 30, 40 years, when buying wasn't a professional career choice and there wasn't professional procurement, and people who were buying products for businesses, weren't really that informed and weren't really that skilled, which enabled salespeople to push products that maybe people didn't want down their throat and get them to buy it in a retail or a business context. Certainly in a business context, and I think the same applies in a consumer context, because consumers are better informed than they ever were before. But in a business context, in response to those sales practices, there are professional buyers out there, and they won't buy anything they don't want. They won't buy anything that their business doesn't need. They won't buy anything they can't justify to their colleagues. And so a salesperson won't get away with convincing or thinking that they can convince a professional buyer to buy something they don't want. They just won't do it. And that lends itself to this notion that this journey between salesperson and buyer is a much more collaborative, sophisticated journey. It's not about one resource or one individual forcing the other person to do something they don't want to do. It's about, as Mahima said, it's about helping people uncover business issues that they might have and helping them navigate a journey to resolve those business issues. And that is a far more rewarding journey on the part of both people. But you certainly won't get away with thinking or believing or succeeding at convincing somebody to do something they don't want to do in a business context.
It's an interesting approach. Is looking at the business and helping them solve that business challenge and having that conversation, and not, like you said, Alan, pushing down a product or a service, something that they're not interested in. What about myth number 2? Salespeople are born and not made. Are you just naturally born with that sales ability, or can you actually grow into that role, Alan or Mahima?
Sorry, no, go ahead, Mahima.
No, go ahead, Alan. That's okay. I can go next.
No problem. This is look, it's an old chestnut. We're a sales education and kind of a business. We develop the skills that employers want in salespeople today. So we're going to be very biased here. If salespeople could only be born, ESI wouldn't exist, or we wouldn't believe we should exist. So we cards on the table, we're going to be really biased. But it's a myth that particularly grates, and we've done the scientific research on this when we set up our business. In that the notion salespeople are born and not made is for us a colossal global cop-out. We wouldn't say it about any other profession on the planet. We wouldn't say doctors are born not made. We wouldn't say engineers are born not made, or lawyers are born not made. People seem to be well capable of developing the skills required to operate at the highest levels of those professions. So why are sales skills so rare or unique or limited to the kind of the big personalities and the interpersonal skills that are so regularly associated with sales? Why do people believe, well, no, you either have that or you don't? When we were designing our curriculum at ESI, we researched to find out about this talent shortage and these skills that employers can't find. We researched job specs and competency maps for commercial roles all over the planet to find out what are these skills employers are looking for. And we built a taxonomy around that. And we know that those skills are, in our world, in our vernacular, higher order cognitive skills. In other words, complex soft skills that you need in any profession. And that's what employers are looking for in people. And people are not necessarily born with those skills. Like any person, you're going to be born with some innate skills and talents. But there's nothing in the sales skills taxonomy that we develop and teach that cannot be developed in any individual, just like any other higher order cognitive skills. So no, we are firmly of the mind that sales is a profession made up of sophisticated skills that can be developed like any other profession. And you may be born with those skills or you may not, but they can certainly be developed, and salespeople can be made as a result.
Mahima.
I don't know what I'm going to add to what Alan's already said. I think it's, just to add a little bit more there. I think there are personality traits that kind of, lend to it being a little bit more easier for some people, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn the skills, right? Like anything else, even if you have the knack for it, if you don't work on it, you're not going to be very successful. You might have 1 or 2 successes, but if you don't work on your craft daily, you're not going to be, it's not going to guarantee you a long-term success. That's kind of what else I would add to what Alan has already said.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of skills? I know Alan was talking about like cognitive, complex soft skills. What other top skills do you think individuals in sales would really need or really do well?
I think it's any skills that you would expect a successful business person, right? Analytical skills, you got to have some financial skills. Like with sales is all about revenue and budgets. That's really it. It's the numbers, right? At the end of the day, if you don't understand that, that's kind of, you're not going to really understand what targets are, what pipeline is, what revenues you're working towards, what's the, ratio of pipeline to revenue, bookings, what's the deal size, all of that. That's all related to, it's a little bit of finance, so to say. It kind of interviews every department almost in an organization. Communication skills is key, right? Because a lot of sales is presentation and being in front of customers, their clients, and talking about your products and services. I think that's another piece. Interpersonal skills, right? You got to be able to have a conversation with anyone at any time, and this is all stuff that you learn as you kind of work on the craft. So I think those are some key skills, that soft skills and hard skills that you would need to be in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Those are all great skills, but here's another myth, because we always see those movies, Wolf of Wall Street, those that are salespeople only out for themselves, they're extroverts. What are your thoughts on that myth? And you really need to have that extrovert personality.
I don't believe you need to have the extrovert personality. I feel that myth comes from the fact that a majority portion of individuals who are sales reps are out there, having those conversations, putting themselves out on the line. You absolutely do need to do that. You need to get in front of your customers. You need to get in front of your prospects and have those conversations. But I don't think you need to be always on and always be like entertaining the room, so to say. A key part of sales that a lot of people forget is just listening. And if you're not listening, how are you understanding what the customer needs, right? Also, for folks that are introverts, like you do need analytical skills, as Alan pointed out, right? If you're always only talking, where are you analyzing and coming up with solutions for the customer's problem. Sales at the end of the day is about solving a customer's problem with your products and services. So that you got to be listening, you got to be, thinking out of the box on how they can do things differently that's not work for them. Alan, turn it over to you.
Yeah, and again, I'll go back to the data, because we have built a curriculum around the data that we know what employers have identified they want in salespeople. And this is a really important myth for me at kind of two levels. First of all, it is, as Mahima said, yes, of course you're going to find salespeople with big personalities, but you'll find people in any profession with big personalities, and you'll find other people who don't have those big personalities. But one of the things you've got to bear in mind is that a big personality alone is not going to make you a highly performing salesperson. Again, I want to remind people of the expectations of the customer, and particularly the buyer that you're going to be working with. They expect a lot more than a big personality from the people that they buy from these days. They expect a much more professional experience. And so much of the skills that Mahima mentioned, you will notice by definition are about collaboration and teamwork. That operates both within and outside your organization. First of all, very few salespeople are able to do their job without collaborating closely with colleagues, whether that's technology colleagues, finance colleagues, customer success colleagues, pre-sales colleagues, whoever they may be. And that's before you get to the collaboration, the people management you have to do on the far side. And rarely you'll be dealing with one buyer. You'll probably be dealing with a committee of stakeholders on your client side. So already, even to get one deal over the line, you're probably going to be engaging with multiple people. And that isn't all about having a large personality when it comes to dealing with those multiple people. It's about understanding how they think, how they operate, problem solving, getting creative about solutions, financial acumen, and the creativity to be able to present that as a solution, and the credibility to be able to present that solution as a highly skilled professional. That doesn't all add up to a big personality. It adds up to a highly skilled professional who may or may not have a large personality. And this for me is a really key message to get across in these kind of sessions, is that it is the diversity of those skills that for us is the solution to this talent shortage. And I really want to emphasize how many vacant sales roles there are out there. Companies cannot find suitably skilled talent to fill their commercial roles right now. And one of the reasons for that is that not enough people understand how highly skilled sales is as a role. And a large part of this non-big personality skill set that's embedded in the sales profession for us is about how we introduce diversity and equality and inclusion into bringing people into the sales profession who have skills that aren't necessarily the largest personality in the room, or the most assertive person in the room. You can be a highly performing salesperson with some very deft, lower personality skills, if that's one way of putting it. So it isn't about being extroverted. You won't succeed if it's all about you in your sales profession. You are depending on so many other people and managing other people, both within and outside your organization. It just won't work if you think that's what it's about. But particularly for people who are looking at this who may not feel they're extroverted, it can be a help in some cases, but it is not the primary skill set that's required to sell successfully today. And please look more deeply at it as a career opportunity. If you don't have that big personality, that does not rule you out of being a highly successful and high performing salesperson.
Wow, so very interesting and very complex to be a salesperson. You can't think in a singular manner. It really has to be a bigger collaborative aspect to sales, for sure. Definitely myth, they're not only out for themselves. Definitely we have to knock out that myth.
Yeah, honestly, Hannah, I couldn't stress more on this. I've never seen a sales rep that's successful just on their own. It's a team sport. There's a whole village behind you to make you successful. It's impossible to know everything, right? Because when you're going through a sales cycle, you're talking about different aspects of what that implementation is going to look like, what that service is going to look like, what is that going to look like. It's impossible for one person to be able to do all of that. So it is a team sport.
Definitely. Now, when it comes to sales and getting clients, Mahima, like people are saying, this is another myth saying that calling people is no longer relevant. So sort of that door-to-door cold calling. Is that true, that calling people is no longer relevant? Like the future of sales doesn't even look like that's what you could do.
Calling people is the most relevant thing. And I cannot, and Alan's laughing there because that is the number one thing that scares people the most is prospecting, picking up that phone and making a dial and saying, hey, my name is XYZ and I'm trying to reach whoever for whatever reason. I think it's an art that's dying. And I feel like we're so dependent on emails or sending, LinkedIn messages or whatever it is, that's just a passive cop out. That's what I essentially call it. It's because it gives the buyer an opportunity not even read or respond. And I mean, I can open up my LinkedIn and there's 100 different messages from people who are sending me the same stuff over and over and over again. In fact, what that does is that just turns the buyer off, right? They don't want to respond. Like if I haven't responded to you once, I'm not going to respond to you. But when you call somebody or you're face to face with someone, they are forced to give you an answer, even if that answer is a no. So I think people are scared of rejection, and that's why they won't pick up the phone and call. I tell my reps, like, if you don't want to pick up the phone and make a dial and have a conversation, maybe you shouldn't be in sales because you can't be successful just relying on email. Alan, you're laughing there. I feel like you have something to add there.
But also talk about rejection. How do you deal with rejection, Alan and Mahima? Like, how do you, that's scary.
You get over it. Listen, the number of times I've been rejected, you just get over it. It's water off a duck's back. When you've been rejected 100 times or 1,000 times, it doesn't even phase you one more time. You just say, okay, all right, we'll reach out to you later. You honestly can't let it bother you or phase you. It's not a reflection of you, nor is it a reflection of, what they think of you. They just don't want to have a conversation with you at that point in time.
Alan, what are your tips and tricks on dealing with rejection and how to get over that hump? Because it really does hurt.
Yeah, it does. I think there's so much in what Mahima said. I'm chuckling kind of out loud because of this kind of antithesis or antipathy people have towards not just phone calls but live conversation. And I so agree with what she's saying. That and I'll come back to that point in a second. But on the rejection side, I think again, I think that there's nuances here, and so much of what we're trying to do tonight is debunk myths and change perceptions. There's always going to be a requirement, or sometimes there will be a requirement to cold call in a sales role. That's going to be part of it. But a lot of what we're talking about is just synchronous conversation with people who do know you, who are part of a long sales process, and people kind of need to embrace the fact that buyers will want to talk to you. They've seen enough text in the research they're doing online. By the time they want to deal with a salesperson, they want to deal with a human being, and they want to deal with that person in dialogue and in meetings. So you've got that kind of need for synchronous communication, that hiding behind text, to Mahima's point, an email or whatever medium that text is in, the written word, Chat GPT can give you the written word automatically now. So you really want some kind of human layer on top of that. But somewhat related to that then is this notion that that rejection only occurs or only happens to salespeople, and it doesn't. I mean, anybody who's been in the workplace will know that in whatever function you're in, you might get rejected. You might get rejected by a colleague. You might get rejected by a manager. You might have an idea that gets kind of shot down or whatever. It is part and parcel of the professional world. And in many ways, dealing with a customer or somebody outside your organization rejecting you, they're not rejecting you. They are saying that what you have to offer them at a professional level isn't suitable for them at a point in time. And Mahima kind of alluded to the fact that point in time is really important. It may not be relevant now, but it might be relevant in the future. And it's about how you handle that and how you don't take it personally, but how you regard that as being information or data that you want to get back. Why are they saying no? Do they not have the problem that you're trying to solve? Is there something inadequate about the solution that you're trying to present to them? Is the timing wrong? Is it just about the fact that it's not now, or it might be in 6 months' time? Is it a budgetary concern? They don't have the money right now, but again, they might have it in the future. None of those are personal causes for rejection. You are trying to find a fit here for your solution on a business issue that your prospect has, and you're both trying to do that together. And they're not saying no to you, and they're not even really saying no to your solution. They're just saying, not now, I have other things to do, I have other priorities. And once you can accept that's really what's happening here, it certainly isn't personal, then it makes it a much easier thing to process. And And yet there is rejection. There's a lot of failure in sales. There's a lot of things you do that don't produce deals, and you do enough of them to make sure you hit your quota. But all the while we look at other professions, other roles, and say, but that's the same in any roles. There's a lot of projects you start that don't get off the ground. There's a lot of, coding problems that a coder tries to solve, they don't get to solve. That they only get to solve some of the problems. Some of them are insoluble. So it's no different than that. And I suppose it also, the flip side of it is, it's so rewarding then when you do find that solution and problem fit, and you get a deal, and all those rejections are made worthwhile by those wins. So just don't take it personally is the key thing. It's not about you. This is, again, in a business to business context, it's a business decision, and that's all it is.
And so, Mahima, how do you know when to persist and when to give up? Going in the lines of rejection, how do you know when to continue and just say, okay, that's enough, or I'll come back to it again and again?
I mean, I feel like this is going to be a very personal answer, and Alan can also add context based on what he sees. Is I think sales reps are kind of always persisting in some level. We don't really give up. So it depends on how hard you're persisting. Like if you look at persisting on a spectrum, you got to know when to really push hard and have those difficult conversations, when to hold your prospects accountable for certain things. And then even when you're rejected, like I think it's okay to ask for Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, is there a better time to connect? Or you're always trying to get that next connection. But even if you're not in a sales cycle, I still tell my reps, feel free to reach out and engage. You don't have to be selling all the time. It can just be, providing some information, or maybe there's a webinar or something that may have been of interest to them. Invite them, because these are all opportunities to re-engage in a conversation, right? So I think you are always persisting, so to say, right? You always want to maintain that conversation, but if it's absolutely where they tell you that hey, do not call me ever again, then of course you got to respect those wishes and just kind of back off. But I've never come across a situation, or at least in my 10 years plus, I've never come across a situation where someone said to you hey, don't ever call me again, unless you've been extremely disrespectful of them. Then that's the only reason why they would say it. So it's kind of my answer to it. Alan, anything you would add, or anything different?
Yeah, I'm going to link back to the very first point, which is this perception, as we try and blow some of these perceptions out of the water, that a salesperson is trying to make somebody do something that they can't do, and therefore if you persist, you're being in some way antagonistic or aggressive. There's a key thing, like Mahima said it beautifully, and this is really, really emblematic of what sales today really is. It is a conversation. It's a journey. You are trying to enable somebody to solve a problem, and they may not have that problem, but it's unlikely they will never have that problem, or they don't understand it's a problem that might be important to them. Otherwise, your whole business has got it's got bigger issues. It's nothing to do with you as a salesperson. So there's a kind of in the context that you operate in on a daily basis as a professional salesperson, there's a kind of a subtext that says, if you're talking to somebody, they are likely to have come across this problem before, or have it in the future, or have it now. So there's a real opportunity to have a dialogue, and you are really helping them work out how important that problem is for them, and whether they're prepared to buy your solution for that problem. And how you do and don't persist with that, a lot depends on what your relationship is and how you're managing that person. And you'll hear now a lot around, I kept talking about, we'll come back to the word skills, but you've got relationship management here, you've got interpersonal skills and interpersonal management. But the key word, the key answer to your question, Han, how do you know when to persist, when not to, it's judgment. And that is another skill that crops up in sales job specs all over the world. And it's a highly sophisticated skill. People aren't necessarily born with great judgment, but they can develop great judgment with experience and with the right kind of training and tuition. And judgment is a very, very sophisticated skill that salespeople learn and develop and have to use all the time. Sometimes in a live conversation, sometimes at a point in the sales process. When's the right time to back off? When is there a chink of armor or a chink in the armor that I might be able to go after? When do I see body language that gives me an indication I might be onto something here? And I'm just hoping people are getting a sense of how exciting and dynamic deploying those skills on a daily basis is and are. But judgment is how you decide, and that's not easily acquired. That's a skill. That's a sophisticated skill.
So many sophisticated skills involved in sales. So judgment, relationship management, interpersonal skills, listening, cognitive, and the list goes on and on. And so my question to both of you, these job seekers in the audience, if they're looking for that particular job and they're in front of an employer in an interview, what types of questions have you heard or you've seen that asks to touch upon sort of these key skills employers are looking for? So A, what kind of questions that involved, and B, how do you think that may could answer them? I know I sort of veered off on the myths, and I'll go back to that as well. And by the way, audience, if you have questions, make sure you type it into the Q&A, so we'll get to you for sure. But your thoughts on these really important skills the employers are looking for, how does that look like in an interview? What kind of questions, and what do you think they could do to show that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always tell people to treat a job interview as, you're selling yourself, essentially, right? So you see where sales keeps coming in. And here's the other thing too, right, is when you read the job description very clearly states what problem that organization is trying to solve for. You got to just showcase how you're going to be able to help solve that problem. It really boils down to that at the end of the day. So there's no one answer fits all. And sometimes if you get rejected from an interview or you don't get the job, that just means you are not the right fit for that problem that they're trying to solve. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be the right fit for some other organization and the problem that they're trying to solve for. I think a lot of the things that come into play is one, asking questions, right? When people go into a job interview, and I know we're veering off into our interviews, but when people go into interviews, they never really ask questions of the employer. They leave the questions to the end. It really should be a conversation. So if someone will ask me, hey, tell me a little bit about how do you handle like XYZ, it's okay to ask clarifying question that develops and gives them more perspective of like what are more stuff, and you're basically trying to engage in a dialogue. I think that helps a lot because you're really trying to clarify what's needed. It's not just a Q&A where one person's asking a question, you're responding, and you're going to the next one. If you can carry out a conversation, if you can showcase the skills that they really need as an organization or as a team, I think you stand a better chance at getting that job. And the other last thing I would add, and this is the number one thing I would say to anyone, is make sure before you go into an interview, you actually know about the organization and what they're trying to solve for. And your questions need to be intuitive, and they need to be like thought-provoking. And I think that's how you kind of stand out.
Great suggestions. Alan, your thoughts on the interview process and questions?
I'm with Mahima. There's probably a whole separate expert panel on interviews, so we could do that one. We could do that one offline. But there's a couple of kind of big picture things. If this is helpful, but this is quite big picture, but it's more about mindset than anything else. I mean, one thing again that I would say to anybody who's thinking about this is, please don't underestimate. I keep coming back to it, but there is a global shortage of sales talent out there. So, so the person sitting across the table for you probably doesn't have a massive pile of suitably skilled candidates, right? They might have a large pile of candidates, but they may not have a massive pile of suitably skilled candidates because they're just not out there. And that will lead to the second point. Really focus in the job spec, and I really would emphasize this, on the skills the employer is looking for. Experience is going to be relevant, but I would argue kind of less relevant than the skills they're looking for. And those skills are going to be, when I go back to our taxonomy, they're going to be skills that you are likely to have deployed in any context, even in an undergraduate or postgraduate context. So think about those skills we're talking about: creativity, problem solving, collaboration, interpersonal communication, initiative. Those sort of skills you would have deployed in any life experience in the past. So think about how you're going to highlight to the employer that you have some of those skills already from the experiences that you have, without necessarily having, I'm guessing a lot of people on the call won't have colossal work experience, but you can show initiative, you can show where you've been creative in the past, you can show you where you've solved problems. And therefore very much think about it as being a showcase for your skills, as opposed to a showcase for your knowledge. Sales is much more these days about how you think than what you do. An employer will show you what to do. They really want to know how you think, how you respond to circumstances. And Mahima gave two great tips there. One, really carefully listen to the questions that they're asking you. The most important thing that they'll be looking for is, are you listening to them? Are you listening to their question? Don't give them stock answers. Really give them considered answers to their questions. If you don't understand the question, clarify it. That's a sales skill. That's what they want you to do with a client. And I think that the point Mahima made, and we have an interview process where we will rule people in or out on the back of this, is what questions you ask us as an interviewer. If you've no questions for us, if you've no curiosity is another skill that crops up in sales specs all the time. If you haven't done any research that begs questions of us, the role of what you're expecting from us, that shows a lack of interest. A salesperson's got to be curious. They want to find out the next level of detail down. They want to keep digging until they get as much intelligence as they possibly can. So don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And again, that's not about a large personality. That's about showing astuteness and great curiosity. That's really valuable in any sales interview.
So audience, don't be afraid to ask questions. So please send in your
Q&A. I think there's a question from the audience. If we want to answer that, Han, or do we want to take that in the end?
No, we can definitely, because there's 15 minutes left. We can definitely go through that. One guest says, can you repeat the list of skills that you're looking for in a salesperson? So I know there were a lot today.
Yeah, there were a lot to go through. I mean, curiosity, questioning, analytics, relationship management, interpersonal skills, communication skills, judgment. Yeah,
curiosity.
You've got most of there, Mahima, but what I was really showing you was, I was going to hop, what I'll do, I'll go mute and see. It may be on our website, but we built a curriculum around the most popular skills that employers are looking for. So we have a list of what effectively are what we call our skills taxonomy, is the 27 most popular skills employers want in salespeople all over the world today. And I will see if I think it's published on our website, but they're all the kind of skills that Mahima's talking about. Think high, in our world, higher order cognitive skills. But if I can find a list, I'll pop a link into the chat. I think it is a link on our website. I got to check and see whether we published that taxonomy or not.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll definitely pop that in if we can find it. Second question from the audience: do you recommend starting a B2B sales career at a small, medium, or large company? And what your answer, please explain why. And I guess in the context of international students or a student that's just graduated, let's say, from school, what would you recommend?
I would say take whatever you get. I mean, honestly, if you have the option to be choosy and you have 3 different jobs, I feel like each one has a different set of, a different experience that will help you, if you're in a small, like a startup environment. That's where I started my sales career. You get a lot of autonomy to experience different aspects of being a sales rep, as well as other things, right, within that organization. However, they may be lacking on the pay side, right? In a large organization, you are probably going to be able to only do a certain limited skill set. There's going to be hierarchy from a progress perspective. There's going to be processes that you need to follow. So if you thrive in that kind of environment, I would say that's for you. I mean, it really depends on what you're looking for and what you're trying to develop, right? And at the end of the day, sales is sales. Take whatever you get.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that, except I would say self-awareness is a big part of this. And again, what Mahima's flagged is There are different kinds of sales roles. An entry level or a starting sales role in a multinational is going to be very different than in a startup. And so one thing I would really consider as you look into this as a career path is what floats your boat, what excites you. I think Mahima used two great examples there. Are you process driven? Do you like to know what to do? Do you like to know what steps to take? Do you like to have a lot of infrastructure and support around you? Do you like that kind of rigidity? Or do you like chaos? Do you like to be able to make things up as you go along? Do you like to be the one who's kind of working out the answers? Have you got that curiosity streak, that creativity, that initiative? There's no either or, but you might find whatever floats your boat, whatever kind of personality you are, might lead you down one of those two paths, because you'll get all kinds of roles in a lot of organizations, but I think your own personality will lead you to what the right context for you to start out in is, and then the world's your oyster once you get into profession. But there's no right or wrong. I think Mahima's spot on. It really does boil down to the individual and your own awareness of not what you're good at, but what do you love? What are you passionate about? What skills do you have that when you wake up in the morning you go, I can't wait to do something in that way. Let that lead you, and you'll be brilliant.
Okay. Two other questions. Where to start a sales career? Should we start from inside sales and then outside sales and so on?
I would say prospecting. Start as an SDR. That's really it. And I mean, that is the number one skill set that I think all sales reps need to build. Is it builds grit, it builds personality, it builds persistence. It also, that's the number one scary thing that reps don't want to do, is cold call and lead generate. But that's the absolute essential thing. The thing that separates great salespeople and successful sales careers from not so successful sales careers or one-hit wonders is your ability to prospect and build a pipeline. It's not just about revenue closed. It's about what kind of a pipeline is following you. And the number one skill that needs to be learned is how to prospect. So if you have no experience in sales, I would say start as an SDR, business development rep, which is focused solely on prospecting.
SDR stands for, I'm sorry, I'm not in
sales development rep. So those are typically, or they also call it business development reps. It's typically prospecting roles where you're just lead generating.
Right. Okay. Great. Any thoughts on that, Alan?
The only thing I'd add to that is that, and I think it's becoming more and more an established kind of entry level role. But I don't know to what extent the notion of an SDR has extended beyond technology sales. And so it's absolutely the right place to start if technology sales is where you're headed. There is a whole raft of other industries with sales opportunities in them that may or may not have that SDR, BDR infrastructure that's so germane to technology. And again, we probably have a very panoramic view, but I would have an open mind about where you might find sales roles that entry level sales roles that may or may not have that very SDR focus. But Mahima's spot on. In large organizations, certainly in technology organizations, that's probably, I'm going to nearly argue, the only place you can start if you've no experience. There might be more rounded or different entry level roles in other organizations, but the organizations themselves will know where they want to start you.
Right.
And if you've no experience, they will know where you can land and where they can develop the skills in you that will allow you to progress. And that's a key thing, is about that career progression, which is another myth we'll come to later on. But it will be the start of a career. The days of going in and you're in as much control whether you like it or don't like it, but you're going in to develop skills and a long-term career here. The idea of bringing people in and moving them along quickly because of the limited talent pool in the market, those days are changing rapidly in the world. So think about it as a long-term play.
I think, Mahima, this question's for you. How is the sales in healthcare? How is it different from others?
I feel like healthcare gets very glamorized, and it really isn't. To be frank with you, I've worked in ed tech, I worked in prop tech. Ed tech is educational technology. Healthcare is healthcare technology. When you say health tech, a lot of people think that you're working as a pharmacy rep. I have never worked as a pharmacy rep, I will tell you that. I don't think it really so my sales experience is very much geared in the technology space, right, in different industries. So that I'm going to talk from that experience, and Alan can provide you with experience in other industries. I honestly don't think when you're starting off in your career, the industry really matters unless your specialty is in medicine or in healthcare technology or in healthcare information management systems, unless you've got that very specialized knowledge. If you're coming in with a generalist background, industry really shouldn't matter. It's about learning how to be a sales rep first. And once you've developed that skill set, then you can start being picky about the industry that you apply to or you get kind of into. I didn't choose to go into healthcare tech. I kind of stumbled upon it because that was the right opportunity available at that time. But I started in educational technology. And I mean, listen, I'm not an engineer by background, but I was selling engineering technologies to universities across Canada. So really, it's about developing the skill set, not really picking an industry unless you've got specialization in that specific industry.
We have other questions to ask, perhaps that we can go to those ones. Is there a big difference between working remotely and working in an office, especially when it comes to sales positions? What do you recommend, remotely and office working? Alan?
Yeah, this is really topical, and I think it talks a lot to what we said earlier on about kind of the large personality, because the old days of 90% of sales being kind of whining and dining your clients and taking the sporting events and kind of doing all your work collaboratively outside of the workspace, those days are vanishing and vanishing rapidly. So you have a completely different dynamic now. You've got buyers who are less accessible in person, and you've got buyers who sometimes aren't even available. One of the things that we find fascinating these days is the old days of being able to land in a city and kind of have all your buyers in the city and say, well, I'll see you while I'm there. Well, now you're telling people you're going to be in town and they're going, well, I won't be. I'll be at home that day, etc. So again, first thing to bear in mind is that the world you want to start thinking about living in is your buyer's world, not your colleague's world. That's where you want to get your headspace in, and your buyers are going to be virtual. So once you understand that, then a lot of it is going to be, again, going down to this notion of self-awareness. A lot of salespeople will still have that desire to engage interpersonally with people. They will want to be in an office environment and be bouncing off colleagues, particularly in the early stages of their career. But I think your employer will be finding their way in this hybrid world. And we probably need to think as sales professionals of being kind of, permanently agile and adaptable, that you're going to develop the skills that enable you to sell virtually at home on your own, or the skills to sell in an office environment with your colleagues, or the skills to sell virtually to your clients. But your clients will decide how they want to be sold to, and you'll need to be able to respond to that. And that's going to probably involve some sort of hybrid working environment. You just need to be aware of the pitfalls of that. And sales is a very it's a very disciplined function. You need to be committed. You need to understand that you're going to drive there's a lot of high performance thinking around it. And if you are working remotely for whatever reason, you need to know you've got the drive and the initiative. Drive, again, self drive is something employers want to find in people. You need to be aware that you have that to be able to drive yourself in that independent virtual working context. But the medium will be dictated by your buyer. How they buy will be dictated by them. You just need to be able to respond to that. Sometimes respond to it differently across different buyers.
Right. Think of the buyer. Okay, gotcha. Mahima, has social media disrupted sales methods? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, more than social media, I would just say the internet in general has disrupted it. There's more accessibility to information, right? As well as it also kind of makes you a little bit more customer focused, because you've got reviews and you've got experiences of other individuals. So you can't really, expect buyers to really believe everything you're saying. Buyers have become a lot more sophisticated. They're going to go out there and do their research and get the information. So you gotta, I think it makes people a little bit more of an honest salesperson, where I feel like they expect honesty. Like, they don't want one product or solution to solve all their problems. If you kind of are coming with solutions around that, I think that kind of helps. And yeah, I mean, it has changed the way you sell, but it's not just social media. It's accessibility to information in general.
Right. Other questions? Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add to that, and this goes back to a little bit to our chat earlier on about phone calls and synchronous communication with customers. Social media has transformed, the internet has transformed selling, certainly because my career started before the internet existed. But I would say one of the greatest risks in the sales profession today is that people rely too heavily on it. It's a little bit like relying on email and text. Whatever information's out there in the public domain, everybody has access to it. You know, what you want to do is get through real-time dialogue with your customers and real-time curiosity and relationship building and questioning. You want to find out what's really happening, what's not around on social media, what the real inside track is to enable you get the deal ahead of the other people who are chasing that deal. So there's no doubt if there's this kind of wide, broad information context out there in the ether, but you know, everybody has access to that. What's going to be different is how you manage the people that you are managing on both the buyer side and your colleagues. And that boils down to these higher order human skills that we keep coming back to. That's where the difference will be made. Everybody can see what's happening in social media. So you're not different by whatever you're picking up there. You've got to take what you're learning there and then deploy that in your relationship with the people you're selling to.
Let's use it as a stepping part, but go deeper, dive deeper for sure. Liana has two questions. The first question we sort of touched upon, Liana, if you wanted to look at the recording and see the answer, but the question is, how can we show that we have those skills that the employers are looking for? So that was answered a little bit earlier. But her second question, the individual's second question is, do SDRs and BDRs have the same responsibilities? Why are they named differently?
It really depends on organizations. You know, some organizations call them SDRs, sales development reps. Some organizations will call them business development reps. You want to get past the naming convention. You want to take a look at what the role is. I think if you read the job description, it'll give you a more clear sense of exactly what is needed in that role. Yeah, so it's depending on how an organization puts it.
Okay. So just it really depends. It's time. Thank you, Mahima. Thank you, Alan, for coming in. There was a lot of information, and thank goodness it's recorded, so people can go back and really look and dive deep into the messaging and the information that you've provided. But thank you so much for your time and giving your information, your all of that to our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a pleasure. You know, this is our second time doing it. So, I mean, I do look forward to it. So I thank you so much, everybody, for kind of like, you know, spending the hour with us.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us. Great to see you, Mahima. We got to do this again sometime. And,
yes, absolutely.
And great questions, by the way, guys. Those of you who are out there, they were really good questions. So thanks for engaging so actively. It makes it really easy.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Han, for being a great moderator there.
Thank you so much. And the audience, I do have a quick poll for you. I'm just going to launch. It's a one question. Please go ahead and rate the session. We're always looking for feedback. And while we do that, again, I just want to say thank you. Much appreciate, Alan, Mahima, for your time. Thank you again.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. So please make sure to rate the poll.